Hi, my name's Abigail, and I'm 29 years old. At the moment, I'm expecting a baby and I'm in my 8th month of pregnancy. Today, my husband and I are off to visit his family, which is just a half-hour drive from our apartment. We make this trip pretty often, about 2 to 3 times a month. The reason for our visit today is my mother-in-law's legendary apple pie. She's such a kind soul, especially since bouncing back after losing her husband last year. She's been looking forward to welcoming her grandchild with open arms. Not everyone in the family shares the excitement about our upcoming addition, though. My sister-in-law Eliana is one of them. She got married 6 years before us, but hasn't been able to get pregnant despite starting fertility treatments 2 years ago. The pressure seems to have made her quite tense. My mother-in-law suggested we try to avoid crossing paths with Eliana to keep the peace, so we usually visit when she's not around. However, today, Eliana surprised us by showing up. Upon seeing me, Eliana couldn't help but comment on my weight, jokingly asking if I was just lazing around because I was pregnant. I was taken aback by her blunt words. My husband quickly defended me, pointing out how inappropriate her comment was, especially to someone who's pregnant. Eliana retorted that she was just concerned about my health and responsibilities as a mother. I decided to respond calmly, agreeing with her to avoid escalating the situation. Yet Eliana pushed further, suggesting I should clean the house to get some exercise. She handed me. With a broom and dustpan in hand, Eliana insisted I start cleaning. However, her actions quickly drew rebukes from both my mother-in-law and husband. She retreated upstairs, leaving the atmosphere tense. My mother-in-law, looking quite sorry, apologized for the unexpected encounter, emphasizing that Ilana's arrival was unanticipated. I reassured her that it was okay, not wanting anyone to fret over the situation. My husband echoed his mother's apologies, explaining that Eliana often acted impulsively. Despite the earlier discomfort, we managed to enjoy a cozy afternoon filled with delicious apple pie and warm tea, although Eliana chose to stay away. Little did we know, a far more serious event was on the horizon. A few days later, I visited my in-laws' home alone for a chat with my mother-in-law. To my surprise, I found the front door unlocked and Eliana inside. She claimed to have taken the day off and, upon seeing me, handed me the cleaning tools again, suggesting I had interrupted her last time. To keep the peace, I began to clean, despite feeling unwell from the morning. The discomfort gradually worsened into pain, prompting me to consider a break. That's when Eliana, shockingly, kicked me, causing my water to break. Overwhelmed by pain and unable to stand, I managed to call my mother-in-law for help before blacking out. I regained consciousness in a hospital bed, confused and in pain, noticing the absence of my previously pregnant belly. Panic set in as I pressed the nurse call button, anxiously waiting for someone to explain what had happened to my baby. When I came to, I learned from the doctors that my water had broken unexpectedly, and an emergency cesarean section had been necessary. My newborn was tiny and needed the warmth and safety of an incubator, but thankfully was in stable condition. Both my mother-in-law and husband, upon hearing the news, were visibly upset but relieved about the baby's well-being. Determined to recover quickly for my baby, I focused on resting as much as possible, looking forward to the moment I could hold my little one. However, the following day took a shocking turn when Eliana, the very person responsible for my premature labor, barged into my hospital room alongside her husband, without so much as a knock. Their audacity left me speechless, and their next words even more so. They proposed a financial settlement for the incident, a suggestion that sent shivers down my spine. Refusing their offer only led them to bombard me with insults, still reeling from the surgery and the thought of my newborn enduring such a start to life. Their offer of a settlement was laughable, and in my frustration, I told them I had no intention of letting this go lightly. They seemed shocked by my refusal and began to insist, rudely suggesting I should be grateful for their proposal and accusing me of disrespecting my elders. Their persistence escalated into a heated argument, oblivious to the fact that we were in a hospital. The tense moment was interrupted by the forceful entrance of my husband. His towering presence and deep voice immediately shifted the atmosphere. Eliana and her husband, who had been so bold moments before, were visibly taken aback by his sudden appearance. Despite their attempts to play off the encounter as a mere coincidence, my husband demanded an explanation for their unacceptable behavior, making it clear there was no excuse for what they had proposed in the wake of such a family crisis. Eliana tried to soften the tension with a shaky voice, insisting that their offer of money was out of guilt and a desire to resolve the situation without legal action. However, my husband, William, remained incensed. He made it clear that the decision of accepting a settlement lay with me, not them. Furthermore, he questioned how they could possibly think money could compensate for the trauma and risk they caused, highlighting the seriousness of my emergency surgery and our baby's condition. I stood by my husband's side, affirming that no sum of money could undo the harm or negate the consequences they must face. Eliana seemed to think that a financial offer could easily smooth over their grievous mistake. Despite the relief that my daughter and I were okay, the thought of what could have happened weighed heavily on me. Eliana's ignorance of the potential severity of her actions was startling, and it seemed her husband might share her lack of awareness. In response to my stance, Eliana became defensive, accusing me of intentionally flaunting my pregnancy to hurt her due to her infertility issues. This accusation left me astounded. Our encounters during my pregnancy had been minimal, with Eliana usually retreating at the sight of me. Her claim of me rubbing my pregnancy in her face puzzled me, as she hardly ever witnessed such moments. Despite her reasoning, her actions were inexcusable. The danger she put both my baby and me in was unforgivable, and my husband and I were united in this sentiment. Understanding her struggles with infertility did not excuse endangering another's life. The gap between understanding and forgiveness remained wide, with no amount of explanation justifying her harmful actions. My husband attempted to reason with them, but it was evident they were not interested in listening. They seemed eager to leave the situation behind, showing no signs of remorse. Overwhelmed by their indifference, especially as I was still recovering from my recent surgery, I expressed my exhaustion and desire for quiet. The commotion they were causing was too much for me in my vulnerable state, and I warned them I'd involve the police if necessary. Their presence and lack of empathy only made my recovery harder. After my husband escorted them out, the weight of the encounter hit me hard. Fortunately, we had prepared for such situations. My husband had discreetly recorded our conversation, providing us with solid evidence. My mother-in-law, equally enraged by her daughter's recklessness, supported our decision to take legal action, given the risk Eliana's actions had posed to both me and her grandchild. Determined, we filed a police report and Eliana was brought in for questioning. During the legal proceedings that followed, Eliana maintained her innocence to our lawyer, claiming she was the one emotionally harmed due to her infertility struggles and accusing me of exacerbating her pain. Initially willing to pay to settle the dispute, she then shifted her stance, arguing for mutual blame and suggesting we dismiss the entire incident. Her confidence waned when confronted with the recording of our hospital room conversation. Presented with undeniable evidence, Eliana and her husband were visibly shaken. Despite this, Eliana's refusal to accept responsibility led her to act rashly, throwing her coffee at us in a fit of anger. Luckily, the coffee was cold, sparing us any physical harm, but her conduct and words during the meeting added to the charges against her, significantly increasing the compensation she was liable for. Throughout this tumultuous process, her attempts to dodge responsibility only fueled our resolve. The recorded conversation was a turning point, firmly debunking her claims of innocence and ensuring that justice would be pursued for the reckless endangerment of my and my baby's lives. My brother-in-law departed from his workplace facing charges of assault directed towards me, stemming from a recent incident. The financial compensation we requested from my sister-in-law had grown significant. Upon explaining the situation to my mother-in-law, her reaction was one of profound regret. She earnestly apologized for her daughter's actions, insisting there was no need for us to settle. "I'm truly sorry for the trouble caused by my daughter. I will ensure she faces the necessary consequences," she said with tears in her eyes. This left me pondering the distress adult children can sometimes bring to their parents, feeling a deep sense of sympathy for my mother-in-law. Ultimately, my sister-in-law was required to pay a considerable sum in compensation. Taken aback by the amount, She repeatedly contacted me, arguing we should lower it because we were both to blame. I found her reasoning baffling, given her actions. Despite her frequent calls, my stance remained unchanged. We would not reduce the compensation or consider settling. Her persistence soon became an annoyance, and I firmly told her to stop, which only angered her further. In an astonishing move, she stormed into my apartment, demanding my presence with loud shouts despite me recovering on the couch from a recent surgery. "Are you all right? Your yelling is disturbing everyone," I responded, hoping she'd cease her loud banging on the door. The noise was particularly concerning given the presence of elderly residents and families with infants in our building, and it was well past 7 p.m. My husband hadn't yet returned from work since my hospital discharge. Between visiting my daughter, feeling unwell, and now dealing with this unexpected and loud visit from my sister-in-law, I was completely overwhelmed. Her actions disregarded the peace of our neighbors and my own health, showing a startling lack of consideration. "I'm not changing my mind, so please stop coming here," I urged, holding my ground despite feeling weak and visibly ill. Yet, my sister-in-law's desperation for a resolution seemed to render my well-being moot. She retorted, not out of malice, but seemingly from a place of deep-seated frustration. "You know I didn't want it to come to this. Your actions have forced my hand. It was inconsiderate of you to get pregnant before me." To her, it appeared that the timing of pregnancy was a matter of competition, a concept foreign and nonsensical to me. I don't see pregnancy as a race or a contest of honor. However, for my sister-in-law, who has faced years of infertility struggles, her perspective seemed to be tainted by her challenges. "Everyone holds their values, but that doesn't justify causing harm," I responded. "I understand your pain over infertility, but it doesn't excuse your actions. I cannot forgive you for endangering my daughter. That, above all, is inexcusable." Just then, the wail of sirens filled the air, a clear indication that the commotion had alerted someone in the building. "Well, if you're making such a scene at this hour, the police being called is only to be expected," I remarked dryly. In a panic, she pleaded, "The police? You have to hide me." But I had no intention of aiding her evasion. When the police arrived, they began their inquiries with her, while I shared my side of the story. It was around this time my husband returned, and I quickly briefed him on the unfolding events. He relayed the entire ordeal to the officers, who then escorted my sister-in-law away. Later that night, my brother-in-law informed me of his decision to divorce my sister-in-law and requested to be kept out of the ensuing drama, a plea that seemed to serve his interests more than anything. Amidst all this, I learned that a colleague of my husband had been at the hospital, suggesting the ripple effects of the incident reached further than our immediate family, underscoring the complexity and depth of its impact. After my admission to the hospital, my husband's colleague overheard my brother-in-law's conversation, and, by the time he returned to work, the story had spread, particularly among the female staff. This led to my brother-in-law facing a considerable amount of judgment, and eventually, the details made their way to the HR department. Realizing that there was no way to deflect the situation, my brother-in-law came clean about the entire ordeal. The company decided that it was best for him to be transferred to a regional office, citing that his actions were not in line with company values. He expressed a strong desire to steer clear of any further complications, mentioning, "I can't afford to be wrapped up in more issues. Any more trouble and I'll lose my job. So please keep me out of this." That was the last conversation we had, and I've not heard from him since. In the aftermath, we received a significant amount of compensation from my sister-in-law. To prevent any future disturbances, we took the step of changing our phone numbers and relocating. This way, even if she found herself in dire straits and sought our assistance, locating us would be impossible. A few months went by, and my daughter was finally discharged from the hospital, thankfully with no lasting health issues. She has been thriving and growing stronger by the day. Meanwhile, word around the grapevine was that my sister-in-law found herself in a precarious financial situation. Initially, she hopped from one friend's place to another, but her lack of contribution to household expenses and her overstaying her welcome led to her being asked to leave. Now, With no place to call home and burdened by financial debt, she's resorted to working part-time jobs just to make ends meet.